Merle Haggard drank through prison walls. Waylon Jennings spent millions escaping addiction, and Keith Whitley drank himself to death at age 33. These country legends turned whiskey into their legacy. But what truly destroyed them? Watch till the end. Number 1. Naomi Judd. Naomi Judd looked like she had it all. The voice, the fame, the family. But behind that bright red hair and those award-winning smiles, she was drowning quietly. She talked later about how she'd drink alone just to stop the thoughts in her head. A little wine to sleep, a little more to stop the noise, and then when she'd wake up, it'd start all over again. She once said it felt like her brain was trying to kill her. Even when the Judds were winning Grammys, she was breaking inside. Depression made her reach for the bottle more than applause. That's the hard truth. Success doesn't make the pain smaller. It just gives you a nicer place to hide it. The saddest part, her honesty later saved lives, but it couldn't save her own. Next came a man who stood on stage but off stage couldn't stand it all. In just over a year since Naomi Judd called a press conference with her daughter, Winona by her side to reveal that she'd been diagnosed with chronic active hepatitis, a possibly fatal liver ailment, and that it had forced her to make a painful decision. "I have to retire from the music industry that I love so much. This isn't the end. It's just another continuing chapter in the Judd saga." Number 2. Billy Walker. How am I done? Oh, I guess that I'm doing fine. Billy Walker, the tall Texan. The name fit his height but not his control. He could drink enough whiskey to knock out a bull and still try to play a show. He started drinking heavy in the 50s when the road was all neon bars and long drives. One bottle turned into two, and two turned into a habit. People said that he'd show up to sessions reeking of bourbon, voice rough but somehow perfect for heartache songs. After surviving the 1963 plane crash that killed Patty Clen, something broke in him. Instead of quitting drinking, he doubled down. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was just the only way he knew how to feel nothing. He'd later say, "I was tired of waking up halfway dead." Sobriety didn't make him famous again, but it let him live long enough to regret what it cost. And the next man, he didn't just drink. He wrote The Hangover into American music. He knew that at last he had been founders. Number 3. Tom T. Hall. Tom T. Hall drank like he wrote songs. Slow, steady, and always with meaning. He'd sit with a bottle of bourbon and write about pain like it was a person sitting across from him. People said he could drink anyone under the table. The man behind That's How I Got to Memphis wasn't just telling stories. He was living the sadness. He once admitted he'd finish a whole bottle while writing a single song. He called it fuel for truth. But truth mixed with that much liquor, well, it burns everything around it. His drinking went from quiet to constant, and by the late 1970s he was hardly ever sober. Friends stopped calling. Fans noticed his spark fading. But his songs, well, still hit deep because they came from that same broken place that he was drowning in. The next legend took that sadness and turned it up to 11. Wild, reckless, unstoppable. We're out of money. Well, give me a dime. We'll call one of our friends. Number 4. Jimmie Rodgers. And then because I'm just a man, you'll find my feet are made of sand. Before there was country music, there was Jimmie Rodgers. And Jimmie loved whiskey almost as much as a stage crowd. Back in the 1920s, he was the original bad boy. He'd drink moonshine before shows, stumble through sets, and charm everyone. Anyway, the father of country music built the whole thing on late nights, smoky bars, and bottles that never stayed full. But the man was sick too. Tuberculosis ate away at him while he kept drinking like it didn't matter. Every cough was mixed with a swallow of whiskey. He said it made the pain easier, but it only made him fade faster. When he died at 35 years old, they said he recorded his last song propped up on pillows, barely breathing, still drinking between takes. And the next name, he didn't just follow in Jimmie's footsteps. He lived his father's curse. Well, as number 5, Hank Williams Jr. being Hank's senior son meant inheriting both the spotlight and the bottle. By 14 years old, Hank Jr. was already drinking like a grown man. He'd finish shows and knock back Jack Daniels like water. Nashville loved him, but the road made him mean. There were nights he'd go through a fifth before sound check, and another by midnight. Then came 1975, the fall. Literally, he tumbled 500 FT off a Montana mountain, face crushed, skull shattered. Doctors didn't think he'd live. But when he came back, the drinking got worse. It wasn't celebration. It was survival. For years, he hid behind sunglasses and whiskey, trying to silence the ghost of his father. It took decades before he found balance, but he never forgot the pain that came in glass bottles. And just when one Hank tried to climb out, another man named Merle was busy pouring his pain into songs that still sting today. Number 6. Merle Haggard. Merle Haggard knew bars better than pews. He started drinking before he could legally buy a beer. Long before Mama tried made him a legend. Growing up broke in Oilale, California, booze became his escape from a lifetime of almost when he got out of San Quentin prison in 1960. His first drink was a celebration. His second started a pattern that nearly ruined him again. Merle could down whiskey until sunrise, then record a hit by noon. In the 1970s, his bus was a rolling bar, cases of Coors stacked next to bottles of Crown Royal. He later admitted he drank to forget the man he used to be, but the alcohol never let him. By the time he quit in the 1990s, his liver was shot and he'd buried more drinking buddies than he could count. But while Merle slowed down, one outlaw cracked the bottle up louder than the amps, and heaven was a drink of wine. Number 7. Waylon Jennings. Straight down the barrel of a man's gun. I'd like to run. One Jennings didn't drink to forget. He drank to feel alive. His nights in the 1970s were a blur of whiskey and cocaine, a cocktail that could drop a lesser man in minutes. He once joked that his bloodstream was half proof and half outlaw. At his worst, he was spending nearly $1,500 a day on substances with whiskey always on the side. Sessions at RCA studios stretched into 3 a.m. benders, and road crews learned to hide the bottle if they wanted to finish a show. But Juan wasn't a villain. He was a man trapped in his legend. The whiskey kept the nerves steady and the stage fire burning. By 1984, though, his body started giving out. He sobered up cold turkey, terrified that one more night would be his last. Yet while Wailing fought for his life, another rising singer was drinking his away before fame even caught up. Number 8. Daron Norwood. I stretched out the door. She told me to get Badiscute. Daron Norwood had a voice smooth enough for Nashville radio, but his liver never stood a chance. He once admitted he drank 20 to 25 shots a night, every night. Tequila, whiskey, whatever was near. Club owners would beg him to slow down, but by his mid-30s, he was missing gigs and blacking out mid-song. His hit Cowboys Don't Cry turned bitterly ironic because he did. When his second album flopped in 1995, he said, "I wasn't losing fans, I was losing myself." He quit touring soon after, saying he'd rather disappear than die on stage drunk. For a while it worked. He found sobriety, sang in churches, even mentored others. But in 2015, he was found dead at 49 years old. Alcohol again in the picture. And somewhere out on the road, another outlaw was already turning every show into a whiskey-fueled riot. Number 9. Allan Coe. Them sad old songs coming out of them speakers was solid country gold. Then I noticed a stranger. Allan Coe treated bars like churches and whiskey like communion. He'd walk on stage drunk, curse out the crowd, then play something so raw it shut everyone up. Back in the 1970s, when country radio was still polite, Coe was chaos and boots. He once bragged he could drink George Jones under the floor. Friends say he'd polish off 2/5 before midnight, then start writing. His album, Long-Haired Redneck, came out in 1976. The same year he nearly lost his label deal for showing up drunk to recording sessions. He'd drive his Harley from honky-tonk to honky-tonk, drinking whatever fans handed him, arrests, fights, bars. He collected them like tour posters. By the 2000s, his liver had given up long before he did. But ask anyone who saw him live. He played like every bottle was his last prayer. The next man wasn't loud like Coe. His destruction came quietly with a trembling hand. Well, I wrote him back a letter, and I told him it was not the perfect country and western song because he hadn't said anything at all about Mama. Number 10. Lefty Frizzell. My love, Michigan, Michigan. Lefty Frizzell could outsing anyone in Nashville and outdrink them too. In the early 1950s, he was the biggest thing in country. Every bar in Texas played "If You've Got the Money, I've Got the Time." Ironically, that's exactly how he lived. The fame hit fast, the pressure hit harder, and whiskey became his shadow. He drank before radio shows, after recording sessions, sometimes during both. His label begged him to sober up, but by 1953, he was missing shows and forgetting lyrics. Producers said his voice sounded hungover even when he wasn't. He was arrested multiple times for public drunkenness, and by his 40s, the industry had quietly moved on. When he died in 1975, liver failure at 47, it barely made headlines. The man who inspired everyone from Willie Nelson to George Jones drank himself into history's footnotes. But another voice was coming, a poet whose songs poured out. Like whiskey on fire, whisper it right. Number 11, Townes Van Zandt. But your softest whisper's louder than call to me. Townes didn't drink for fun. He drank like a man trying to erase himself. Whiskey was his medicine, his punishment, and his muse. Friends said he'd wake up with a hangover, reach for a bottle of vodka, and start writing before the shake stopped. By the mid-1970s, he was living in trailers, singing about loss so beautifully it hurt to listen. Doctors diagnosed him bipolar, but instead of pills, he trusted bourbon. He'd finish a fifth during a set and still hit every lyric of Poncho and Lefty. His hands bled from playing. His liver screamed, yet he called it living honest. He died on New Year's Day 1997. Blood alcohol nearly 3%, 3 times the legal limit. They say he smiled before his last breath. But while Townes faded out quietly, another man's story burned fast. Fists, whiskey, and self-destruction in motion. You're happily floating through nothing. You know, nothing. All of a sudden, a big giant fist. The way I picture it, I'm sure it's not quite a fist, but grabs you and scuffles you together like that. Puts you into a form and slams you on the face of this veil of tears and says, "You got to move." Number 12. Johnny Cash. Another 100,000 died on their Johnny Cash's battles weren't only with pills. Alcohol had its own chapter. During the 1960s, touring non-stop, he started drinking a bottle of Jack Daniels a day. June Carter said she'd find him passed out on bus floors, surrounded by empty beer cans and broken bottles. His arrests became headlines, 7 in total. When in El Paso 1965, drunk carrying amphetamines trying to cross the border. He once crashed his truck in Tennessee woods and nearly burned down half the forest after drinking through the night. Cash said later, "I drank to kill the pain of being me." Rehab took him in twice. Faith brought him back more times than that. By 1970, he'd found sobriety on stage again. Black suit, clear eyes. But the next story didn't get a second chance. She drank to quiet her heartache. She drank to quiet her heartbreak. And it cost her everything in our streak of lightning cars and fancy clothes. Another 100,000 died on their way. Johnny Cash's battles weren't only with pills. Alcohol had its own dark, sprawling chapter. A shadow that stretched across the brightest moments of his early fame. During the relentless touring of the 1960s, the pressure to be the man in black became a crushing weight. He started drinking a bottle of Jack Daniels a day, not for pleasure, but as fuel to endure the endless highway and the screaming crowds. It was a desperate attempt to quiet the inner turmoil that had haunted him since his brother's tragic death, and the immense expectations he carried. June Carter, the love of his life, often described the heartbreaking scenes she would encounter. Finding him passed out on the grimy floors of tour buses, his iconic frame surrounded by a fortress of empty beer cans and shattered bottles. His arrests became national headlines, 7 in total, each a public testament to his private collapse. The most infamous was in 1965 in El Paso, where he was found disoriented and drunk, carrying a stash of amphetamines, attempting to cross the Mexican border in a haze of self-destruction. The chaos wasn't confined to the road. In a fit of drunken despair, he once crashed his truck deep in the Tennessee woods, the subsequent fire nearly burning down acres of forest, a literal reflection of the internal inferno he was battling. Cash himself would later reflect with painful clarity, "I drank to kill the pain of being me." It was a cycle he seemed powerless to break. Rehab took him in twice, and his deep, abiding faith, coupled with June's steadfast love, pulled him back from the brink more times than anyone could count. It was a war of attrition against his own demons. By 1970, a fragile sobriety had taken root. He stepped onto the stage at Folsom Prison, not as a broken man but as a survivor. The black suit remained, but now it was worn by a man with clearer eyes, his voice carrying the hard-won wisdom of a soul that had stared into the abyss and, by some miracle, managed to step back. But the next story didn't get a second chance. She drank to quiet her heartache. She drank to silence her heartbreak, and it cost her everything in a whirlwind of streak of lightning cars and fancy clothes. This hard-won sobriety, however, was not a finish line, but a fragile ceasefire in a lifelong war. The ghost of addiction never truly left him. It merely retreated into the shadows, waiting for moments of vulnerability. Even during his celebrated American Recordings resurgence, the struggle echoed in the weary, weathered depths of his voice. A voice that now held not just the pain, but the profound cost of survival. Every note he sang in his later years was freighted with the memory of those lost nights, a raw honesty that made his final performances so devastatingly powerful. He had become a living testament to the fact that the battle never truly ends. The clarity in his eyes on stage was a daily victory, a conscious choice to face the world without the crutch that had once defined him. Yet this victory made the tragedy of others all the more poignant. For every Johnny Cash who found a path back, there were those whose stories ended in the very darkness he narrowly escaped. His legacy, therefore, is a dual one, a beacon of hope for recovery and a sobering reminder of its elusiveness. He was a saved man who never forgot what it felt like to be damned. And that tension is what forever cemented his status not just as an icon, but as a profoundly human soul. But the next story didn't get a second chance. A redemption arc or a late career renaissance. She drank to quiet her heartache. She drank to silence her heartbreak. And it cost her everything in a whirlwind of streak of lightning cars and fancy clothes.